problem is that we're not
Blacks
telling
here in
the
this
story.
city have made
starting
a
to use
significant
drugs earlier
contribution.
in life than they ever have.
Welcome to Minority Focus. I'm Jimmie Moore, and I'm absolutely delighted to have joining me today Roschnell Brown, who is on staff at the Behavioral, wait a minute, let me get this. Four Rivers Behavioral Center.
Four Rivers Behavioral Health.
Behavioral Health here in Paducah, Kentucky. Want to make note up front that Roschnell's father, Frank Brown, was the very first host of Minority Focus. And with that in mind, I just knew that Roche would be out on my trail one day to bump me out of this, you know, like father, like son. Welcome, man. How's your dad doing?
He's doing good.
That's
Yeah,
good. Glad
yeah,
he's back in the
yeah.
city.
He's moved back in January.
Excellent. I hope
Yeah,
that one day, real soon, I'll be able to have him on the show on the other side. I think he'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah, he would.
I know that
He
I
would.
would. Four Rivers Behavioral. I was kind of mistaken in thinking that all the things in the city that have to do with drugs and alcohol, all of these things are separate entities. But as we were talking before the show, you explained to me that it's all about behavior
Yeah.
in the final analysis, and that's what you do. I know that you started out counseling or doing therapy with people about those kinds of problems, and you branched out into, as they say, wearing 4 or 5 different hats.
Yeah.
What got you started at it? What brought you to it?
Actually, interesting, Minority Focus. Actually, I went to college to be an engineer. I was going into space.
Is that right?
And by the way, they're moving now towards seniors, and so one day I still expect to go into space. But anyway, I got some incorrect counseling by an advisor in my first year in one of my math classes, and math was my strong suit. And but this guy, I think, didn't want to see minorities in that program. That was back in the early 70s. And his advice to me with that course, rather than this is how we study and this is what we can do to get your grade up, his advice was, you can't be an engineer with a grade like that. And so I ended up, I had been in school really just a few weeks, met a bunch of folks, and it happened that my group of friends were mostly into social work. And I said, well, you need to go into social work. And so I went into social work and got my bachelor's there. And got some encouragement after I came out from some key folks to get my master's. And so ended up going into counseling and found actually that was a niche.
Right, right. I wonder, you know, counseling people about their behavior. You know, it's a field that some people love, they'd never leave. And then I would think that I'd get burned out on it after a while. There's this thing about the emotionalism that you have to experience inside in dealing with other people's. Now, I'm not saying you got burned out, but you did move on to something else. Did you find that got a bit much for you after a while?
No, it wasn't that. It was, I had an opportunity to do something else. And you always want to be looking for opportunities to grow. And I loved counseling, loved that direct work, but I actually got the opportunity with the company to be a boss, to tell people what to do. And I thought, okay, I can do counseling and I can tell the others how to do the counseling, and they can do it the right way, my way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I had the opportunity to grow, make some more money, and move up with the company. And that's what that was mostly about, not turning away from the counseling, but developing in another area.
I met people who have degrees in say, social work, psychology degrees, and the ways that they deal with some people psychologically. Can't possibly be utilizing any of the things they learned in studying psychology with the actual human hand-on kind of thing that you have to do physically. You know,
Yeah.
I met some people, my daughter's one of them. But I imagine that would be something special that you'd have to have in order to.
Yeah, and in school, and you know, there's school and there's life. And school teaches you how it's supposed to be, how it's written to be in the books.
Exactly.
And then you get in life, And if life allowed, you could do it just the way they tell you in school. But when you get out there in life and you get on the street, you get on the job, you end up not dealing with folks one at a time. It's 100 at a time.
Right.
And so you have to answer the bosses, you have to answer the deadlines, you have to answer the payors, you have to be accountable, and you have people who are hurting, and lots of people who are hurting and needing intervention. And you're trying to negotiate all that and maybe get an hour of sleep a day. And so it doesn't always play out in life the way it does in the book or in school. You do things a little bit differently. We learned, though, it's important to always know where the, I call it, what's that, the plumb line.
Right.
Understand where the plumb line is so that you know you don't want to get too far.
Exactly.
But you also want to be flexible enough to come up with something that works for this individual in this particular situation. And the book just might not have all the answers. Sometimes you learn some things on the road.
I know you mentioned that you started out that way, and then you branched off into some other responsibilities, other areas of responsibility. What do you actually do now? What do you?
Now, well, let's go back to where I left. I went back to a supervisory position, and I was over the counselors. Okay. I was over the Paducah office, Paducah adult office, which is one of the larger offices in the agency, and one of the more varied offices as far as professionals. And I was over that, and like the supervisory role, like the idea of developing programs, looking ahead and solving problems. And then I had an opportunity to make another change, really just this last year. Mm-hmm. And so I stepped out of that position, and now I'm in a situation where I'm pretty much by myself. They call me a specialized program planner.
Okay.
I can figure the program planner. I'm not sure what the specialized is yet. But we're working on 2 or 3 new programs. The agency is looking at taking some steps in some slightly different directions, novel, innovative, hopefully, to meet some needs that haven't been met before. And I have the opportunity of doing the research on that, looking at our program and how we can adjust, writing it up, developing it. And then once I do that, I will be lead person in putting it into place. So I get to be the boss, and I get to be the one who's bossed. I get to do it my way.
Every boss got a boss, you know, as they say, even if it goes back to.
I'll have the fun of doing it the way I think it ought to be done, and being able to prove that. Of course, you have to come back and prove that, and show that was right.
Do you miss the hands-on part of it, the actual dealing with people and their problems?
For the moment, no, and that's because I know I'll be doing that again soon. Actually, I still, on occasion, do some direct work. I will fill in when some of the other folks are backed up, and there are a couple of areas that can only be done with specialized certification, and we don't have a whole lot of those. And so we may find some days when staff is out sick or on vacation or tied up with other things, and we have some emergency situations, and they'll come across the hall or give me a call and ask, can I help out with that? And I'll actually do that.
In a lot of job areas, they have the recertification thing. Every now and then you got to go back and study and brush up, get back up to par, up to snuff. You have to recertify every so often?
Not so much recertify as much as stay up to date. You have to have continuing education, and you have to document that. So you've got to go to training. You want training that's relevant to your field and relevant to what you do, and you have to show that to show your licensure board that you're staying up with things, and most of the practitioner licenses or certifications require that you have so many hours of continuing education in a licensing period.
How are we doing mentally healthy wise? How is West Kentucky doing? Is there a large clientele? Are we handling a lot of people as compared to some of the areas around us?
We have a lot of folks with a lot of problems in Western Kentucky. Some estimates show that in certain areas, alcoholism is one, and in certain drug areas, that we have a disproportionate number of folks. There's some diagnoses. that we look at that it seems that we have a disproportionate number of people in that. There are also some health issues that are in the same situation. But I think on the whole, Kentucky probably reflects what's going on across the country.
Right. So it's not, as I guess as in most places, it's not just a matter of people being unhealthy mentally, period. But a big part of it being people doing things that make them mentally unhealthy.
There are a lot of lifestyle issues that are involved. What you eat, how you socialize, decisions that you make, um, um, what you do to stay healthy, physical exercise, and those kinds of things. A lot of lifestyle issues that go into mental illness. There are a lot of family pattern type things. In other words, coping skills, problem-solving abilities that are passed down in families, and the ways that we handle things can be passed down. That can go into it, but there are actually a lot of illnesses that are genetic-based, and it's not a matter necessarily of how your folks handle things or what your folks did. It's what got passed on in your genes.
Right.
And schizophrenia and the psychotic disorders. Depression is one of the most prevalent illnesses across the country. And we're coming to understand those things more and more. And we used to believe back in the 80s that strictly it's how you were raised and it's the decisions that you made. Well, medical science has shown now that to a great degree it's what's going on in your body. And you get those things mixed too.
Right. In talking sometimes with firemen, police, they have a preventative program they do where they go out into society and talk to people, kids, schools, and what have you. In your capacity or in your organization, do you have opportunities to do that?
We do. We have a mechanism for that. We don't really get to do that just a whole lot. I'll take that back. In substance abuse, we have a whole department. Okay. It's called prevention.
Okay.
And that's their whole job, is to go out into they go out into the elementary schools, the middle schools, and in the high schools throughout the region, right. And they do any number of programs for that. Substance abuse adult has some of that. On the whole, in the whole field of behavioral health, we do too little prevention, and that's because it tends to be not a highly funded project and not a highly prioritized area in the legislature. This gives me a chance to kind of jab the legislature maybe. Mental health, behavioral health tends to deal with the people who are not in the forefront. And in some cases you may say the throwaway people. It may be looked at in some ways. And it doesn't rise high on the barometer until you have some major thing happening. You have a serial killing, you have something, and that gets associated with mental illness, whether it is or not. It becomes high on the barometer, and then the legislature tends to act. Or maybe something happens and you get a grassroots movement in the community, and they get enough pressure going that makes the legislature aware. And short of that, there's the tendency to just leave that thing alone. And maybe because of the stigma, we don't want to bother that, we don't want to touch that, it might get on us. Or just the others are yelling louder than you are.
I hear what you're saying.
And so behavioral health treatment is very expensive. Most folks can't afford what it costs, and the insurance companies are beginning to come up, but they don't cover it. The state tends to be the major insurer. And so it's really expensive. Most folks can't afford it, and it gets kind of shoved to the side. The state's always in a money crunch and cutting back here and there wherever they can. Tends to be whoever yells the loudest. And folks in mental health, the folks who are affected by mental health, behavioral health problems, tend to not be loud yellers.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's an issue. And I suspect that one day, as the families and the people who are affected by behavioral illness, the communities start to get real loud, then the legislature will move differently, allocate more monies, and I think we can see some change in the area. Fact is, if we don't do what we do, the whole community is affected adversely in major ways.
Exactly. I know some of the things that have gone on in society, like you were talking about, the major things that happen. You know, the serial killers, the school things that happen at the schools and all that sort of thing. If people, I'm talking about the preventative thing that you'd like to do more of. If people were more aware, perhaps, of what it's all about, what to look for, what to see, give them some knowledge about it, they wouldn't be as apt to just say, it's just a kid, or it's just the way old people act, or something. Now, when I was a very young man, my dad said, something wrong with that boy. I know, you know, back in the day, they had a different means of dealing with things. Discipline played a big part in it, you know, for that matter, as far as control is concerned. But some of those people in society today, if they'd known how to look at their kids and some other things to be aware of, other than just, you know, I remember seeing a 2-year-old kid once that was sitting and bang his head on the floor. I mean, as hard as he could until somebody stopped him. You know, something wrong there. You know, that maybe needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
But people don't want to say. People don't want to say there's something wrong with my child. You know, they want them to be normal, so they don't.
Well, if you say there's something wrong with a child who's behaving, who's showing problems and it's behavioral, and you take it to the next step, then you'll end up saying there may be a mental illness going on here. Nobody wants that.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to have schizophrenia.
For sure.
Nobody wants to have depression with psychosis. Nobody wants to have post-traumatic stress disorder where you're remembering horrible events and going through it over and over again. Nobody wants to have that. Nobody wants to have the major anxiety disorders, agoraphobia, where you get so nervous going to your door that you don't come out of your house for months and months at a time. You can't stand to be out in crowds. Nobody wants to have that. Nobody wants their loved one to have that.
Exactly.
No one wants that attached to them. And so because the conditions that we treat are visible, they're highly visible and affect the way people relate with each other, you tend to not want to mention it.
Right.
It's too obvious.
I saw something curious. I've seen it twice in an area where I work, where a person is like leaving a building. I think, and what's that word you just used?
Agoraphobia?
Agoraphobia? Is that this person, in leaving the building, was persistent and continuously looking behind them, you know, and even to the point of getting to the door and searching the floor, and standing there in the door for an absurd amount of time, and all the way out to their vehicle, constantly looking down. Is that what that is?
No, it doesn't.
I said that because you said something about not being able to leave their house.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of things. There could be one of the psychotic disorder. A person could be paranoid, could have psychosis, hearing voices telling them to do that. A person could be having intrusive thoughts, obsessive compulsive disorder, where their mind is telling them they didn't lock the door. You didn't lock the door. Go back and lock the door. And so they're trying to leave, but they're being compelled by intrusive thoughts to go back and check the door. They're looking back, maybe thinking, I'm not going to do this. I know I locked the door, and trying to leave, but they can't leave because their mind is saying you didn't lock the door. And if you don't lock the door, someone's going to go in and steal all your stuff, and you won't have any money and everything, and that pressure there. So that could be a manifestation of a number of illnesses.
Could we get a couch in here? I think I need to lay down here. No, seriously though, even tiny things, I suppose, that wouldn't matter hill of beans to most people, you know, could be along those lines. Perfect, for example, I find carpets out of line, or one corner folded over. I can't talk. I'll go in a person's house and I'll straighten their rugs out, because that needs to be uniform. That's probably some kind of. But at the same time, if you looked at the rest of my house, you'd say, why does he care about the rug being out of sync? But there are so many things to look at. So many things that don't meet the eye, because the eye isn't accustomed or doesn't know what to see. You know, and that's what you're That's what you train to do, and that's what you
Yeah,
practice.
yeah,
That's what you've
yeah,
practiced all of. How many years you been in this?
Oh man, I think I've been in it all my life. I measure it by my oldest daughter's age. I started work for Four Rivers the day she was born, and she was 28
Is that right?
last month.
Far out. Well, see, I was going to say 30 because I came back to Paducah in 1970. Didn't we sing in a choir for a while? Weren't you in a choir at Washington Street? Yeah,
I
we went to
remember
church
that.
together.
Yeah, we did that. Well, it was 30 because 2 years before I started with Four Rivers, I was with the juvenile department. But yeah, I remember that.
Right.
You came back and you were surprised because I didn't talk very much. I was very quiet, and and when you came back, I was singing and booming.
For sure.
What?
Well, there are certain people that I meet. There's just a demeanor about them. There's a gentle, kind, methodically thinking type of thing about them. And you've always impressed me that way. And I'd love to hear you scream. I don't think I've ever heard you raise your voice as long as I've known you. And I wonder but that's what it takes to deal in this kind of field, because you have to be tuned, and you can't be dragged here and there in what you're doing. You've got to maintain that even keel. You're one of the most even keel people in it.
Well, I appreciate that.
That's what it seems to be all about.
Yeah. Well, when you're dealing with chaos, someone's life's in chaos, someone's mind's in chaos. It just doesn't work when both of you are in chaos.
Yeah, for sure.
someone's got to be steady there. And I think it's the same as in any profession, anybody doing a craft. You have to be able to stay focused at what you're doing, know what you're doing, where you're trying to get, and what it takes. And when you're dealing with people whose emotions are going haywire, they actually need someone, if they're going to be helped, they need someone that they can feel like that person is going to be an anchor. It just doesn't do them any good if they're seeking you for help and you're flying off too.
Exactly.
And so it simply has to be that way.
Exactly. Is there such a thing as a success rate? Can you really equate it that way? Can you do that with what you do?
Actually, the field is becoming, I don't have any figures, but the field is becoming more oriented toward that. Back when I came out of school, the idea was that you do the best you can, you give people the best of your knowledge and your experience, and hopefully they'll make some use of some of it. Well, in recent years of the money crunch and all that, and the payers, that's not good enough.
Exactly.
Now, you've got to show me what you're doing, how much it's going to cost, and show me some results. And that has actually pushed the folks the psychologists, the psychiatric social workers, the psychiatrists, all of us in the field. It's actually pushed us to hone in on our skills, to identify the skills, identify the behavioral treatments that we're doing and the expected results, and to tally up results in terms of how many people are you able to discharge successfully from service? Then look at, if you're looking at psychiatric hospitalizations, in the last 2 years, has the rate of admissions come down? Or has the rate of recidivism? They've gone to the hospital, they're out, they come back. They go back in the hospital, they go back. Has that number declined? And so we're actually able to use some ways of measuring now to determine the success of the interventions. And yes, there should be, and I personally agree with that, there should be a way to measure success rate. I mean, we shouldn't be in here, we shouldn't be doing this hoping someone gets well. We ought to be skillful enough and knowledgeable enough and precise enough, excuse me, some congestion going on, to involve ourselves with people in ways that they do get better. And we should be able to measure that.
Was it found that what's the high school things that were going on, some of the major crime type things that are going on in our area, do you find that when those things happen, there's an increase in admissions? Does that stoke people to check themselves out, or does it disturb people to a degree that they feel the need to be part of what you do, to take part in what you do?
I think like any kind of crisis event, there's a tendency right away to check yourself out or to go and seek some help, and then it dies off.
Right.
Then it tends to die off.
Your daughter Jessica was at Heath
Mm-hmm.
High School when that incident happened there. You were able, I'm sure, to deal with her personally, hand on hand at home. where it was necessary. Now, she's a pretty strong little girl. I know that. But did you feel the need to have to use your expertise with her?
Well, that's yes and no. I mean, I'm daddy. She wouldn't tolerate that, and that wouldn't be appropriate. It wouldn't be appropriate. I use my expertness as a parent.
Right, I understand.
No, you do good parenting, but no, in fact, and I don't think Jessica. In fact, I know she wouldn't mind because she mentioned it herself. We took advantage of some of the counseling that was available. And Jessica, she told me one day, said, "Daddy, I think I need to see one of those counselors." And she asked me certain questions.
Yeah.
And she interviewed me about, now, what are they going to do? What's he going to do?
Right.
And what's he going to say? And it is confidential. And she took me through that.
Right.
But she told me, "Daddy, I think I need to see that counselor."
That's excellent. Like I said, she's a pretty strong little girl. With my kids, can you help me get my boy to mow the yard for me every now and then?
Send them on over. We'll see what we can do.
I know that as long as humankind is, there's going to be a need for what you do.
Yeah.
And it's marvelous that you do what you do. It's much needed. I only wish that people were more aware of it and the advantages of taking advantage of what you do, and maybe some of the problems that we have in these areas could be circumvented before they get into any precarious type situation, if you will. It's been great having you out, man.
It's been
I
good
really
being
do
here.
appreciate
Really
it.
enjoyed
I don't even
it.
get to see you out in society, just way in a blue moon.
They never let me out of the office.
Yeah.
They never let me out.
And we even grew up down the street from each other. We lived, a block away from each other? Played together a little bit there
Yeah.
when we were kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
now we function in this capacity that
Yeah.
your father began. That's miraculous, but that's how he functions.
Kind of interesting how God works it all out.
For sure. Good to have you, man. I really do appreciate you coming out and stuff.
Thanks for calling me.
Got to come
Enjoyed
back
it.
again sometime.
Sure
We
will.
worked with Dick Lovell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Dick Lovell
Yeah.
on the show once.
Yeah.
We got to get do a show about Alaska.
Okay, yeah.
He
he's-
likes to talk about Alaska.
Yeah, really.
Really appreciate your efforts, man, and what you're doing, for Paducah and for society in general. And maybe one day we'll get back out and talk some more about some, in-depth
I'd love
parts
to.
of the thing. I sure hope. So thanks a lot for coming. Thanks for joining us on Majority Focus. And remember that you can't help a person reaching out to them with a clenched fist. For Minority Focus, I'm Jimmie Moore.